welcome to the podcast Love to Heal. I'm Yulia, your guide on the journey of self-discovery, healing, and spiritual growth. Hi everyone. The title of today's episode is Love is the Main Goal of Life. I joke that we should tattoo this phrase on our forehead so we can remind ourselves of the goal of life every day and every time we look in the mirror. Remember too that love is God, and by making it our goal, we put love in first place, above all else. Setting the correct priorities is crucial in spiritual growth. Have you ever met a person or heard of people that made something like a career or family or money their goal? I'm sure you have, and I'm sure that most people achieved their goals. But what did they sacrifice in the process? I know countless people that have amazing careers, but they're lonely. People that are great parents, but are struggling financially. How many extremely talented actors and singers have become legendary only to commit suicide or overdose on drugs or watch their families fall apart? People say you can't have it all. Something has got to give. I disagree. From the numerous books that I've read on spiritual growth, from the many spiritual leaders and teachers and philosophers that I've listened to and that I follow, I've gathered that you in fact can have it all if you set your priorities correctly. If all you care about is power, for example, you will likely face many struggles to get it. You will likely lose friends and maybe family in the process. You might get it and eventually lose it all in the end. And we see this. We see this happen with presidents. We see this happen with other people of power. If your goal in life is, for example, abilities, being the best athlete, artist, whatever it is that you love to do so much and strive to achieve, you will either fail at becoming the best, or you will win and lose out on some other vital parts of life, or lose life altogether, as many brilliant people have in car and airplane crashes, homicides, you name it. On the other hand, if you prioritize love, if you strive for unconditional love and believe in God, your chances of having it all drastically increase. Let's take a look at why putting love first works. First, we must understand that feeling attachment to something temporary, in other words, something earthly, will always backfire. If we make money the goal of life, for instance, then when we don't have it, we will suffer greatly, sometimes to the extent of depression, and other times suicide. Sometimes when money is the goal, a person becomes willing to steal and kill for it. When you make a loved one your highest priority, then when that person leaves or dies, you will have an extremely difficult time moving on or even finding meaning in life. Every time you make something earthly a priority in life, you risk losing it. And when you lose it, you experience, because of the loss, a myriad of negative emotions. Blame, sadness, resentment, desperation, anger, fear. Need I go on? As I've mentioned in prior episodes, all these negative feelings, thoughts, and emotions further ruin our health and our future, as well as those of our descendants. Ask yourself, how attached are you to the earthly possessions in your life? If tomorrow you lost your house, would you still love God? Would you find the strength to carry on and not lose your mind over it? If yes, then you have nothing to worry about. That means you're not so attached to this earthly possession that you cannot live without it. And so you don't have to worry about thieves coming into your house. You don't have to worry about your house going up in flames or something happening to where the bank takes your house away. But if you answered no to the question, then losing your house is obviously a fear of yours because you're too attached to this possession, and so you risk losing it or something happening to it. Basically, you should learn to live with the idea that anything God gave you can be taken away at any moment, including your life. You simply can't get attached to anything but God Himself. There was a man, he was Russian, an immigrant, a Jewish man, who lived his life believing in doing the right thing, being honest, honorable, virtuous, modest. In other words, morality was the priority for this person. It was above all else. And he was very proud, and his future was also up there with the priorities. He was educated, and of course he wished for his kids to grow up educated and make him proud, to marry similar outstanding individuals and make him a proud father and grandfather. He wanted this so badly, he didn't see it any other way. And for a while, life was satisfactory. His children got married, not exactly to his first choice of spouses, but they seemed happy, and soon grandchildren came too, except that they lived far away. They weren't very close to the grandparents, and they didn't speak the language, the Russian language, and they weren't brought up with the same faith. They weren't Jewish. They weren't being brought up Jewish. And then the children of the man got divorced, and they led lives that the man didn't consider in the least honorable. And so his life that he had so carefully planned out and awaited turned out to be a disappointment. Often in life, we're tested on things that matter most to us. If we pass these tests with love, then all will be well. My Russian teacher, spiritual teacher, she tells me, while your kids are still young, accept ahead of time, accept their future boyfriends, girlfriends, spouses, accept them now. Because when the time comes, and let's say my son brings a girlfriend to the house that I don't like the way she looks, I don't like that she's a bad student, whatever it may be, if I don't accept her and I judge her, it will only do harm to me, to my son, to my relationship with my son, and I will not have passed the test of unconditional love. If I apply divine logic to this situation and understand that there's a lesson here for everyone involved, and we must solve this situation with unconditional love, then the situation will resolve itself. Most likely, my son would come to his senses and realize that maybe this person is not a good match for him. The takeaway here is that nothing in our life is for sure, and we shouldn't expect any particular outcome. We're constantly tested in the subject of unconditional love. For example, if you are the most proper individual and your son becomes a delinquent or a drug addict and ends up in prison, will you still love him and accept him for what he is? Or will you die of shame or spend the rest of your life judging him and hating him? I've heard of so many parents that disown their kids once they learn of their being gay. I personally can't wrap my head around it. Let me give you another example. This example comes from the author and philosopher Sergey Lazarev that I've mentioned several times in my podcast. And he gives an example of a woman who focused on the future a lot. And I wanted to bring that to your attention as well. So focusing on the future instead of on today and on our Creator leads to many problems. We hear about staying in the present all the time, seizing the moment, loving the present moment. And this is because love should be more important than the future also. True happiness doesn't target our instincts, which should serve only to increase love in the soul. Recognize what is present in your present life, in every moment. Be thankful for your family, your home, your job, the food on the table, and let these earthly pleasures increase love in your soul towards the Creator. So the story of this woman that I'm about to tell you is actually very similar to the story that I told you earlier about the man who was so focused on morality and his future. And so for this woman, the concepts of justice, ideals, and morality, just like for the gentleman, they were unshakable. Her worship of these earthly traits and conditions were off the charts. Criticism and condemnation of immoral people began to intensify. She couldn't stand criminals and traitors. The result of the incorrect order of values in her life? Well, a son that's a drug addict, a liar, and a thief, who is also rude to his mother and lies and steals from her. This woman was so used to condemning people who are flawed that the slightest dissatisfaction with someone triggered a program of destruction of others and also a program of self-destruction. If you recognize this pattern in yourself, you have to understand that we need to learn to love everyone, no matter how they behave. There's just no other way around it. We need to overcome condemnation, which stems from our ego, not from a place of love. Here's a bit more karmic explanation for you. The son of a man for whom money is everything must become a beggar to survive. If not a son, then a grandson. It all depends on the degree of worship of the earthly. If ideals and justice are the highest value for a woman, her child, in order to survive, must give up these values. If we want our kids and grandkids to be happy and healthy, we must start the change in ourselves. Sergey Lazarev gives the example of a snake that sheds its skin. At that moment, when the shedding happens, the snake is completely defenseless. Likewise, for humans, to change our character, we need to feel defenseless. What happens is that material wealth and money give us a high sense of protection, and so there's no need to change. And oftentimes, a person that has it all gets sick to actually help himself change. Of course, he doesn't know this. When we are sick or lose a loved one, we realize that none of the material matters. And for that period of time of sickness or mourning, we begin to change. We begin to prioritize the spirit over the body. Unfortunately, once we get better, most of us go back to the old patterns and wrong priorities. But if we begin to consciously change our focus onto love, there will be no need for sickness or mourning of someone who died a tragic death in our life, in our family, or family members leaving us too soon. Our job is to see the divine will in both good and bad, and for both good and bad to push us towards love. Let me summarize it for you in other words. If you make anything earthly your goal in life, and we're talking anything from material things to virtue, you have a high chance of either many struggles or loss of your goal altogether. And if you don't struggle, your kids and grandkids may inherit karmic troubles. On the other hand, if you make love your goal, unconditional love, then your chances of attaining your goal, leading a happy life, and leaving behind healthy descendants increases greatly. We simply can't make our goal something temporary. Anything earthly, money, health, education, is here today, is gone tomorrow. Let me give you a personal example. In my 20s, I was very serious about ballroom dancing. I've mentioned that I'm a ballroom instructor, and I started this when I was in college. So I was teaching, I had a professional partner, and we competed quite a bit. If you know anything about ballroom dancing, it's very competitive, and it's very, how should I say, beauty-oriented, perhaps. Just think Dancing with the Stars. Tons of makeup, very sensual costumes, dresses. I mentioned in one of my episodes in the past that I was very full of myself, and especially on the dance floor. Now that I look back on that period of my life, I can't even believe how little love there was in my soul and in my thoughts. When I was amongst other dancers, all I saw was competition, and not in a healthy way. I would size up my competition and think to myself, I'm a better dancer, I'm prettier, my dress is better. I'd even wish my competitors bad luck. Basically, my ego was running the show and leaving no room for love. No room for love towards the art of dance, something that I love to do, but now that I look back on it, where was the love in this art form? And also, there was no love towards the other talented people around me. And I continued like this for years, dreaming about becoming a champion. And while people and coaches told me that I did have great potential, I never reached my goal. Obstacles always appeared in my path, from countless wardrobe malfunctions to unexpected choreography mess-ups. So many things happened. Now I understand why I never reached my goal. First of all, my priorities were way off. There wasn't even a mention of God or any higher power. It was all me, which allowed my ego to outweigh my loving and kind personality. Had God granted me my wish of becoming a champion, I would have never learned what humility is. I can't even imagine how much more full of myself I would have become. Obviously, this wasn't the right path for the development of my soul, and I'm okay with that. I also used to not understand why performers and athletes prayed before events and thanked God after a good performance. Now, that's all I do. I always thank God for even giving me an able body, the ability to share my talent and joy of dance with others. Now I only compete and do shows with my students, but it's all the same process. Here in Cleveland, there's a husband and wife that are U.S. ballroom champions, and they very publicly talk about their faith, and their priorities are very clear, with God at the very top. And they definitely deserve the title, and I applaud them for their achievement. So, no matter how you look at it, love wins in the end. So it's best that we consciously orient ourselves towards love. When it comes to competition, I know that I'm my biggest competition, and I don't focus my attention on crushing others anymore, rather doing my personal best. Also, I remind myself that it's not the destination that matters as much as the journey. Finally, and once again, regarding priorities, I don't promote any religion, but I do want to share some of my observations. I'm Jewish, as I mentioned, by nationality, and I value the traditions that my family had a really hard time preserving due to the communist regime in Soviet Union. So here in the United States, when I became a mom, my husband and I decided to enroll our kids in a local temple for preschool and Sunday school. Throughout the years, I've noticed that the rabbi, his wife, and some of their kids that run the programs were never sick. And I'm telling you, we have been there for a few years now, and they're there every single day, and they have never been out sick. They're never absent, and you will never see them without a smile on their face. They all have many kids, as you probably know. Jewish Orthodox families, they have 8 or more kids, and all their kids are healthy and smart. They work 7 days a week, and they seem to never run out of energy. This is what having God as priority is like. I don't think it's necessary to go to the extreme and become an Orthodox, but I do think that making love a life goal can work wonders. We have to remind ourselves that nothing belongs to us forever but our soul. If we know that the only constant in this world of ours is love and God, then we should make love and God our priority always. This is something we can't lose, ever. It's always there. Let's see what some philosophers and authors have to say on this topic. First, I would like to go over a quote by Laozi, a Chinese philosopher from 571 BC, before our century. And the quote in translation is something like this: "When the way is lost, there's virtue. When virtue is lost, there's benevolence. When benevolence is lost, there's righteousness. When righteousness is lost, there are rituals. Rituals are the end of fidelity and honesty, and the beginning of confusion." A Swedish writer, Stephen Stenned, explains this quote and says that virtue is inferior to Tao itself, Tao being the way in Chinese philosophy. When we lose track, when the proper order of the universe is not evident in us, We then have to trust our virtue, our sense of proper conduct. And so we get lost repeatedly because we're easily convinced of ideals that seem right at the time, but lead us astray. We listen to words despite their shortcomings. Holding on to virtue is to trust it more than the way itself when it's revealed to us. Many of us are quick to decide what's virtuous and what's not. And then we take pride in holding on to the belief without ever questioning it. When we are convinced of being virtuous, we easily lose compassion as well as common sense. It's important to regard virtue with caution and do so consciously so that we realize when it leads to intolerance, prejudice, cruelty, and other deviations of Tao. Tao is infinitely yielding, but virtue tends to be quite the opposite when we hold on to it without questioning. Laozi makes it very clear that virtue, although seemingly splendid, is what people follow in the absence of contact with Tao. This is true even for the very highest virtue. In his quote, Laozi presents a descent in 4 steps from Tao. If Tao is lost, we only have virtue to guide our steps. If virtue is lost, we should try to behave benevolently, thereby causing the least damage possible in our confusion. Benevolence needs no reason, since it acts from our hearts, our compassionate instincts. We want to be good for no other reason than that good is superior to bad. We might not always know how to separate the one from the other, but when we perceive what we perceive as good, we do without any other purpose. If benevolence is lost, we have to turn to righteousness. But without benevolence and virtue, it becomes a very risky business. Such righteousness can quickly lead to oppression and inhumane laws. Righteousness always contains some purpose. We do this to accomplish that. The end justifies the means. Although whenever this argument is put into use, it tends to lead to sacrifices surpassing the benefits of the outcome. When even righteousness is lost, what remain are rituals, the ignorant commitment to customs and beliefs that have lost their meaning. That is mankind at its lowest, repeating things of old just because of habit, sticking desperately to outdated fragments of thoughts as if their lack of reason were proof of their elevation. As if ignorance is bliss, when rituals rule, force is always used to uphold them. They're not questioned because there's no explanation to them. Unfortunately, it happens frequently that our society degrades to such practice. Let's now take a look at Lao Tzu's quote through the lens of a believer in God and love. Love is the highest virtue, explains the writer Sergey Lazarev. It is the aspiration towards God that gives us the correct attitude towards the world. When love for God disappears, love for the world around us appears, which turns into good nature because it loses dialectics. Even gentleness, comfort, good nature are already signs of gradual loss of love, believe it or not. But there is still a lot of love in good nature. Good nature turns into morality, that is, into justice. When morality weakens, decency remains. When a person focuses only on external moral guidelines, he gradually loses decency and love. And then love is replaced by the instinct of self-preservation, along with aggression, the desire to suppress the other, take away all that benefits from him and enslave him. And then comes what Laozi calls the beginning of all disorder, which is that people begin to resemble animals. Honesty, responsibility, trust, and respect for the law gradually disappear, leading to the decomposition of individual states and the entire civilization as a whole. When I first learned about the correct order of things, it was mind-boggling to me that virtue wouldn't be first in the order of the universe, because we're related to good, kind human beings. But it turns out that neither virtue nor even spirituality can be the main goal in life. Only love, pure, unconditional love, can. Let's explore this even further. Sergey Lazarev explains the phrase, "deliver us from evil." The evil one, the cunning, is a mind without love. The devil really represents consciousness, the mind, abilities, and spiritualities without love. The phrase, "deliver us from evil," is a sort of request to God to put love above reason, above abilities, and the consciousness, and to help us feel that the soul comes first, and the spirit, or the consciousness, comes second. First love, then ideals, principles, abilities, spiritualities, etc. First, the divine will, which is realized in love, then the human will, which is in the form of instincts. I called my podcast Love to Heal because I'm a believer that love can and does heal bodies and souls. The first step to start healing is setting the correct priorities, with love being at the very top and love being the goal of life. The second step is learning how to disconnect from any situation in life and use divine logic, which makes it easier to overcome our dependence on abilities, intelligence, and higher values of spirituality. Regular training in complete muscle and mental relaxation is also very helpful. Physical exercise and fasting create a favorable background for changing your character and worldview. Without the latter, there won't be any healing. This is where my belief in God greatly differs from the church, for instance. If you sin, you don't get to go to church, get your sins absolved, and go on about your life, same as before. You pay for everything, and if not you, your kids and your grandkids will pay. Such is karma. This is why we're here on earth, to evolve, to grow, to learn to love. Every day is an opportunity to gain love in the soul. Every day we have the option to forgive, to remove aggression from our soul, to see the divine will in everything, and to love God in every person. If we learn to love the world around us and every person as our child, then we can still punish and scold if needed, but we do so without affecting our inner love. We do this sort of superficially so that our subconscious aggression remains null. This practice is one of the main keys to maintaining our health and well-being. Furthermore, sincerity in feelings helps purify the soul. You can't hide hatred, regret, or resentment in your soul. Our behavior, every moment of our life, will be determined either by aggression or by love. There's no middle ground. In fact, it's not even enough to avoid aggression. We must learn to practice love every single day in all situations. We have to look at any person that crosses our path as an opportunity to show our love and good nature. People that are angry are lacking love. Their aggressive behavior is a scream for help. If you come across a rude person, for example, remember that giving them love will help them heal and help you heal yourself as you do it. Think of our whole life as a simulator for accumulating love. If we try to use it for anything else, it will malfunction. Know that the practice of hatred and resentment ultimately turns into a program of self-destruction. In other words, disease, tragedy, and death. To recap, in order to lead happy and healthy lives, we should overcome our attachment to sensual, spiritual, and material happiness, and replace all that with the main impulse of happiness, which is aspiration to our Creator. We must overcome the feeling of superiority over other people, since on the spiritual level we're all one. We must learn to respect our parents and accept the divine will, which means not to complain about fate and not to seek out people to blame. We have to love God above rules and laws. We should also realize that happiness in this universe cannot be eternal. Joy and gain is always accompanied by the pain of loss. The more we worship joy and pleasure, the more unbearable the loss of it becomes. Only when we realize that any happiness is a means of getting closer to the Creator do we not lose happiness either in joy or in loss. I hope I gave you enough to think about for this week. And today I want to leave you with a quote from Paulo Coelho, a Brazilian novelist. In love lies the seed of our growth. The more we love, the closer we are to the spiritual experience.